The cold expanse of space stretched infinitely beyond the viewport of the Eos Vanguard, a silent witness to the impossible decision Captain Roran Hale faced. The glow of a distant nebula bathed the control room in eerie hues of violet and gold, its swirling gases forming a cosmic tapestry that whispered of forgotten civilizations and broken oaths. And yet the greatest mystery before him wasn't out there among the stars. It was standing right in front of him. Ayla. She wasn't human. That much was clear. Her translucent, opalescent skin shimmered in the dim light, reflecting colors that seemed to shift with her emotions. Her long, silver-white hair flowed like liquid mercury, framing a face both haunting and beautiful. But it was her eyes, those impossibly deep, glowing sapphire eyes that held him captive. "Do not do this, Roran," she pleaded, her voice a melodic whisper that sent shivers down his spine. "If you interfere, if you take what is not yours, the balance of the universe may be undone." Roran clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around the hilt of his pulse blade. He had made a promise, a contract with the Etheri rebels who sought to reclaim the heart of Ethera before the Zelthar warlords seized it. The artifact was the key to everything, the survival of a species, the fate of an empire, and humans didn't break their word. "You don't understand," Ayla pressed, stepping closer. Her presence was intoxicating, like standing too close to a star and feeling the pull of its gravity. "The heart is not just an object. It is alive. If you take it, you bind yourself to its will, to my people's fate. There is no turning back." Roran exhaled sharply. He had heard legends about the Ethari, beings attuned to the very fabric of the universe, their existence entwined with the lifeblood of the stars. He had never believed them. Until now. "Ayla, I swore to bring the heart back to your people," he said, his voice firm but laced with something he wasn't ready to name. "I don't break promises." She closed her eyes, as if pained by his words. "Then you doom yourself, Captain Hale." A warning, a plea, maybe both. Roran's communicator crackled in his earpiece. "Captain, we're running out of time," his second-in-command, Lieutenant Vex, reported. "The Zelthar fleet is moving into position. If we don't retrieve the artifact now, they'll claim it first." Roran's pulse quickened. He turned back to Ayla. "You said the heart is alive. What does that mean?" She hesitated, her glowing gaze flickering with uncertainty. "It means that once you touch it, it chooses you, and its choice is eternal." A shiver ran through him, but he pushed it aside. "Duty first, always." "Ayla, I have to do this," he said, stepping past her toward the temple entrance. The massive stone doors, engraved with celestial runes, loomed before him like the gateway to something far greater than he could comprehend. She caught his wrist. Her touch was electric, sending a jolt of unfamiliar energy through his veins. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't!" For the first time, doubt flickered in Roran's chest, but promises were meant to be kept. He pulled away and strode into the darkness, never once looking back. And behind him, Ayla whispered to the void, "The stars have already decided your fate, human, and I fear it is one you will not escape." The temple loomed before Roran like a relic from another age, its towering stone spires stretching toward the heavens, whispering of forgotten gods and ancient sorrows. Vines, thick with bioluminescent spores, clung to the cracked walls, pulsing, with a faint glow that seemed to breathe with the ruins themselves. The air was heavy, thick with something he couldn't name, a presence, a warning, or perhaps both. Ayla moved ahead of him, her steps almost soundless against the marble floors. The eerie blue light from the temple's ethereal lanterns bathed her delicate features, making her look otherworldly, more so than she already was. "You never told me why this artifact matters so much," Roran said, scanning the surroundings for signs of movement. The Zelthar could be closing in any moment. Ayla hesitated. Because the heart of Ithara is not just an artifact. It is the lifeblood of my people. He frowned. I thought it was a power source. It is far more than that, she said, turning to face him. The heart is alive in ways that even we do not fully understand. It is not simply a relic to be taken, it is a soul to be respected. Something in her tone made Roran pause. Then why did your people ask me to retrieve it? A shadow passed over her face. Because they do not know what they ask of you. A chill crept down his spine, but he pushed forward, his grip tightening on his pulse blade. We don't have time. For riddles, Ayla. If the Zelthar get here first, none of us will have a say in what happens. She studied him for a long moment, and for the first time, he saw something raw in her expression. Fear. Not for herself. For him. Roran, listen to me, she said. The heart is not meant to be possessed. It is meant to choose. If you take it, you will become part of it. Forever. Forever is a long time, he muttered. Longer than you can comprehend. The weight of her words pressed against him, but before he could respond, the temple trembled. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through his bones. The heart of Ithara was close. It was calling. Ayla inhaled sharply. It knows you're here. Roran took a step forward, ignoring the way his pulse quickened. This was just another mission, another contract. He had been through worse. But as they entered the inner sanctum, he knew, deep in the marrow of his being, that this was different. The chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls pulsed with streaks of liquid light, flowing like rivers of molten silver. The ceiling was an open view of the cosmos itself, an endless sea of stars shifting and swirling, as though the temple existed outside of time, and in the center, hovering above an altar of carved obsidian, was the heart of Ithara. It was beautiful. Thus, artifact pulsed like a living thing, its crystalline form shifting between states of solidity and translucence. It radiated an energy that was neither warm nor cold, but something beyond the physical, something that resonated deep within his soul. Roran took a step toward it, but Ayla grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. No, she whispered. His heart pounded. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. Her eyes, those glowing, endless blue eyes, searched his face, pleading with him in a way that words never could. He wanted to listen, but humans kept their promises. Roran reached out, his fingers brushing against the heart's surface. The moment he made contact, the universe itself seemed to shatter. A surge of energy erupted through him, fire and starlight flooding his veins. His vision blurred as flashes of the cosmos filled his mind, galaxies spiraling into existence, civilizations rising and crumbling, the endless march of time unfolding before him in an instant. He gasped, his breath stolen by the sheer immensity of it. Then, a voice. Ancient. Infinite. You have chosen your fate, human. The chamber shook violently, the ground cracking beneath them. Ayla screamed his name, but he barely heard her, because in that moment, Roran Hale was no longer just a man. He was something more, and he had no idea what that meant. It tore through Roran's body like a supernova, scorching his veins with fire and ice in equal measure. He gasped, stumbling forward as the heart of Ithara pulsed within him, no longer an object separate from him, but a force bound to his very being. His breath came in ragged gasps, his senses overwhelmed by a flood of images that weren't his own. Stars dying in silence, planets crumbling into dust, eternal cycles of creation and destruction. And somewhere in the vastness of it all, him. A singular, insignificant human, now tethered to something far greater than he could comprehend. Ayla's voice cut through the chaos. "Roran!" A sudden force pulled him backward, away from the altar. His body convulsed, his mind swimming in and out of reality. He felt her hands on his shoulders, shaking him, her voice filled with something he had never heard before. Panic. "Stay with me," she pleaded. Roran gasped, gripping her arm as though it were the only real thing left in the universe. What did I do?" Ayla's face was pale, more than usual. Her shimmering skin had lost its luster, and her wide, glowing eyes were filled with dread. "The heart has chosen you," she whispered. The words sent a new wave of nausea rolling through him. His hands trembled, and as he looked down, he realized something horrifying. His skin was glowing, a faint, iridescent shimmer traced along his veins, the same way the heart of Athera had pulsed before he touched it. His stomach twisted. "What the hell does that mean?" Ayla swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around his arm. "It means you are now bound to it, to my people, to our fate." Roran's pulse thundered in his ears. No, that wasn't the deal. I was supposed to retrieve it, not whatever this is." "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "The heart does not allow itself to be taken. It chooses a vessel, a guardian, and you, Roran Hale, are now that guardian." The air in the chamber felt too thin. His mind raced through every scenario, every possible way to undo this. He had always thought of himself as a soldier, a man who followed orders and saw the mission through. But this? This wasn't a mission. This was something permanent, something he could never walk away from. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm. "Then tell me how to get rid of it." Ayla flinched, sadness flickering in her luminous eyes. "You can't." Roran let out a harsh breath. "There has to be a way." She shook her head slowly. "The heart of Athera is woven into your existence now. If it is destroyed, so are you. If you die, the heart dies. And if the heart dies—" She hesitated, her throat tightening before she could finish. Roran frowned. "If the heart dies, what?" She exhaled, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Then so do my people." The words hit him like a physical blow. He pulled back, shaking his head. No, that can't be right. There has to be another way." Ayla looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You made a promise to save my people, didn't you?" His breath caught in his throat. A promise. His whole life, Roran had lived by a single unbreakable code. Humans kept their word. But this wasn't what he had agreed to. A roar echoed through the temple, shattering the stillness. The ground quaked, and above them, the sky filled with the unmistakable silhouette of Zelthar warships descending through the atmosphere. "They're here," Ayla breathed. Roran forced the chaos in his mind aside. It didn't matter what had happened. It didn't matter that his life had just been changed forever. Right now, there was only one thing that mattered: survival. He reached for his communicator. "Vex, we've got incoming! Get the EOS Vanguard ready for immediate extraction." A burst of static answered him, followed by Vex's strained voice. "That might be a problem, Captain. Zelthar warships just dropped out of FTL. They've got us locked in a gravity net." "We're pinned!" Roran gritted his teeth. "Then we'll have to fight our way out." Ayla turned to him, her expression grim. "You don't understand. The Zelthar aren't just here for the heart. They're here for you now." His blood ran cold. "They know?" She nodded. "They'll tear the heart from you if they have to. And if that happens—" Her voice wavered. "You won't survive it." The temple trembled again, dust raining down from the ancient ceiling. Roran set his jaw. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen." Ayla hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "There's an escape route through the lower catacombs. But if we take it, You have to trust me." Roran's pulse thundered. Trust was a dangerous thing, but in that moment, with warships overhead and a stolen destiny burning inside him, he realized something terrifying. Trusting her might be the only way out of this alive. "Lead the way," he said. Ayla grabbed his hand, and together they ran. Oh! The temple shook violently as the first barrage of Zelthar artillery struck the surface. Dust and fragments of ancient stone rained down, turning the once holy ground into a battlefield. The echoes of warships breaking through the sky above sent a deep guttural vibration through the earth. The Zelthar were here. Roran's pulse raced as he followed Ayla down the dimly lit corridors of the catacombs. The walls glowed faintly with bioluminescent vines, barely illuminating the winding path that spiraled deeper beneath the ruins. "Where does this lead?" Roran asked, his grip tightening around his pulse rifle. Ayla didn't look back. "A hidden transport bay. If we can reach it, we have a chance to escape." Another explosion rocked the temple, sending a crack snaking across the ceiling. A fine mist of dust rained down over them. Roran gritted his teeth. There wasn't much time. The weight of the heart of Ethera pulsed inside him, a strange and powerful energy that hummed beneath his skin. He could feel it now, whispering to him, guiding his instincts. His senses had sharpened, his awareness extending beyond his own body. He could feel the Zelthar soldiers above them, their armored boots stomping across the temple floor. He could sense their intentions. Cold, ruthless. They wanted him. Ayla skidded to a stop at a massive stone door, her hands flying over the intricate carvings that lined its surface. She traced a glowing symbol, whispering something in her native tongue. The runes flickered, then pulsed, before the door groaned open with a deep, ancient breath. Beyond it lay a vast underground chamber filled with the remnants of Ethari technology. In the center rested a sleek, elongated starship, unlike anything Roran had ever seen. Its surface shimmered as if it were alive, its contours smooth and seamless, forged from materials not found anywhere in human space. "This is our way out," Ayla said. Roran stepped forward, his gut telling him something was wrong. "It's too quiet." As if on cue, the far wall exploded in a fiery burst, the impact sending Roran and Ayla sprawling. A cloud of debris filled the chamber, and through it, shadows emerged. Dark figures clad in advanced Zelthar battle armor, and leading them was him, Lord Varos. The Zelthar warlord was a towering figure, his armor gleaming black with glowing crimson, etchings that pulsed with eerie energy. His reptilian eyes, slitted and golden, locked onto Roran with predatory focus. "There you are," Varos rumbled, his voice like a low, rolling storm. Roran pulled himself up, leveling his pulse rifle at the warlord. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Varos smirked. "A mere human, bonded to the heart of Ethera. How unnatural." Roran's grip on his rifle tightened. "I don't know what your plan is, but you're not getting this thing." Varos chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Oh, Captain Hale, it was never yours to begin with." With a flick of his clawed hand, the Zelthar warriors rushed forward. Ayla reacted first, raising both hands as streams of energy burst from her fingertips, weaving a protective barrier between them and the incoming attackers. The force field shimmered as Zelthar plasma rounds slammed against it, sending ripples of energy outward. "Get to the ship!" she shouted. Roran didn't need to be told twice. He pivoted, firing a volley of shots at the nearest Zelthar soldiers. His aim was sharper than ever, his reflexes faster, like the heart was enhancing him. His shots found their marks, dropping two of the soldiers before he reached the ship's boarding ramp. Ayla was right behind him, her energy shield flickering as she deflected another barrage of fire. But Varos wasn't finished. With unnatural speed, the warlord lunged, his claws glowing with dark energy. He swiped at Roran, who barely dodged in time, the sheer force of the attack sending a shockwave through the air. Varos sneered. "You cannot control the heart, human. It will destroy you from within." Roran clenched his jaw. "Yeah, let's test that theory." He let go of the fear, let go of the doubt, and for the first time, he let the heart of Ethera guide him. A surge of raw energy erupted from within, crackling through his veins. His vision sharpened, the world slowing around him. The warlord lunged again, but this time Roran didn't move. He reacted. His hand shot forward, and without thinking, he released a pulse of energy that sent Varos hurtling backward. The Zelthar leader crashed into the chamber wall, the impact, leaving deep cracks in the stone. Even Varos looked surprised. "Impossible," he growled, pulling himself to his feet. Ayla grabbed Roran's arm. "Now!" They sprinted up the boarding ramp, Roran slamming his fist against the control panel. The ship roared to life, the engines humming with a deep, resonant power. But as they lifted off, Varos stood, watching them go. And he smiled. Roran's stomach twisted. That wasn't the look of a man who had lost. That was the look of a man who knew something they didn't. The stolen Etheri ship shot through the dense atmosphere like a comet, breaking free of the ruined temple's gravitational pull. Roran gripped the control panel, his fingers moving instinctively over alien technology that somehow, impossibly, felt familiar. The heart of Ethera pulsed within him, syncing with the ship as if it were an extension of his own body. Outside, the battlefield was chaos. Zelthar warships loomed like monstrous silhouettes against the dark expanse of space, their cannons firing beams of crimson energy toward the surface. Etheri resistance fighters fought desperately, their smaller, more agile vessels weaving between the enemy's massive destroyers in a desperate attempt to hold the line. Roran's communicator crackled to life. "Captain!" Lieutenant Vex's voice was tight with tension. "We're taking heavy fire! That Zelthar fleet cut off our escape route!" Roran's eyes flicked to the scanners. He saw it immediately. The Eos vanguard was trapped within the Zelthar's gravity net, its shields flickering as waves of enemy fire pounded against its hull. "They weren't going to last long, Ayla," Roran said, voice urgent. "Tell me this ship has weapons." She moved quickly to the co-pilot station, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface. "Not in the way you think," she replied. "This isn't just a ship, Roran. It's Ethari biotech. It responds to you." Roran didn't have time to process that. The enemy fleet was closing in. His crew was running out of time. He exhaled, pressing his hands against the ship's console. "Fine. Then let's see what it can do." As soon as he willed it, the ship moved. It wasn't piloting in the traditional sense. There were no manual thrusters or weapon controls. It responded to his thoughts, to his instincts, weaving through the battlefield with a speed and fluidity that no human craft could match. He could feel it, like an extension of his body, as if the heart of Ethera was guiding both him and the ship as one. The first Zelthar warship came into view, its massive cannons rotating toward them. Without hesitation, Roran pushed, and an arc of golden energy erupted from the ship's hull, slamming into the Zelthar vessel. The enemy ship buckled. Under the impact, its shields flickering before it was consumed by an explosion of blue fire. Ayla gasped. "You're controlling it!" Roran barely heard her. More enemy ships were closing in. The Eos vanguard was still pinned down. He gritted his teeth, focusing all his will into the ship's core. Energy surged through him, through the vessel, until the sky ignited. Bolts of golden light rained down like falling stars, ripping through the Zelthar fleet with precision. Each strike was devastating. Engines imploded, gravity nets collapsed, entire cruisers were torn apart as the Ethari ship cut through the enemy like a celestial predator. A comm line opened, and Vex's voice came through, filled with stunned disbelief. "Captain, What are you? Roran didn't have an answer. The last of the enemy destroyers detonated in a blinding cascade of light, and the Eos vanguard finally broke free of the Zelthar's grip. Cheers erupted through the comms, but Roran barely heard them, because Lord, Varos's flagship had just arrived. The massive vessel loomed above the battlefield, its black hull an ominous silhouette against the stars. Unlike the rest of the Zelthar fleet, this ship wasn't attacking. It was simply watching, waiting. Roran could feel Varos's presence, even from this distance. The warlord wasn't just hunting him, he was studying him. Then a transmission came through. Varos's voice, smooth as silk and sharp as a blade. "Impressive, Captain Hale. You wield the heart's power well. But you have no idea what you truly hold." Roran's jaw tightened. "I know enough to destroy you." Varos chuckled as if amused. "Do you? Tell me, Captain. Do you feel it yet? The way it's changing you?" Roran's fingers curled into fists. He could feel something, yes. Ever since the heart had bonded with him, he had felt different, stronger, sharper, but also less human. Varos continued. "The heart does not belong to you, human. It belongs to something older, something far beyond your understanding. You think you command it? No, it commands you." Ayla stiffened beside him, whispering in Ithari, her voice barely audible. "He knows." Roran kept his voice steady. "If you think I'm just going to hand it over, you don't know humans very well." Varos sighed. "Then I suppose I'll have to take it, when the time is right." And with that, the Zelthar flagship vanished into hyperspace. A heavy silence fell over the cockpit. The battle was over. The Ithari were safe, for now. But Roran knew this wasn't the end. He turned to Ayla, who was watching him with something unreadable in her expression. "You were right," he admitted quietly. "This isn't just an artifact." She exhaled, her gaze softening. "No, it's something far greater." Roran looked down at his hands, flexing them as golden energy flickered beneath his skin. He had made a promise to protect her people. And now that promise had bound him to something ancient, something dangerous. But as he looked at Ayla, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and quiet fear, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just fighting for a cause anymore. He was fighting for her, and for the first time in his life he realized that some promises were more than duty, some were destiny. The stars stretched endlessly before them, an infinite sea of light and shadow. The Eos vanguard and the stolen Ithari ship drifted side by side, safe for now, but forever changed. Roran stood in the ship's viewing chamber, hands braced against the sleek metallic railing. The universe had never felt so vast, so utterly unknowable. He could still feel the heart of Ithera humming within him, a presence that was both a part of him and yet something else entirely. Ayla stood beside him, silent. She had been watching him ever since the battle ended, her sapphire eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "You haven't spoken much," Roran said, breaking the stillness. She exhaled, her silver hair cascading over her shoulder. "What is there to say?" Roran turned to face her. "Maybe that we survived?" He smirked slightly. "That's usually worth celebrating." Ayla's lips pressed into a thin line. "Surviving isn't the same as winning," he frowned. "You think we lost?" She shook her head, then met his gaze. "I think this was only the beginning." He couldn't argue with that. Varos had let them escape. That alone told Roran that whatever game the Zelthar warlord was playing, it wasn't over. And then there was the other, deeper truth, the one neither of them had spoken aloud. The heart had changed him. He could feel it, even now, running through his blood like stardust. His reflexes were sharper, his thoughts quicker. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, he swore he could hear something, whispers of the cosmos, pulling at the edges of his mind. It wasn't just power. It was connection. To the Aetheri. To Ayla. To something far older than either of them. "You're different," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. Roran let out a breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I know." Ayla hesitated before stepping closer. "I told you before. The heart doesn't just give power. It binds, it changes, and once it chooses, there is no undoing it." Roran searched her face, catching the flicker of hesitation in her expression. "What aren't you telling me?" Ayla's fingers curled at her sides. "It's already started, hasn't it? You feel it, the way it's pulling at you." He wanted to deny it, wanted to tell her that he was fine, that he was still himself. But the truth sat heavy in his chest. "I don't know what's happening to me," he admitted. She swallowed. "If the transformation continues, you may not remain human." Silence. It was one thing to wield power, another to become something else. Roran let out a slow, steady breath. "And what does that mean, exactly? That I'm going to wake up one day and suddenly be Ithari?" Ayla looked away, her hands gripping the railing. "It means you're becoming one with the heart. Your body, your mind, it will change to survive what you've become." She hesitated, then whispered, "And I don't know if there's a way to stop it." A cold weight settled in his stomach. He wasn't afraid of dying. He had faced death more times than he could count. But this was something else entirely. A new existence, one he had never asked for. But then he looked at Ayla, at the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hands trembled just slightly, and he realized this wasn't just about him. She was afraid of losing him, and that truth hit him harder than any battle ever had. "Ayla," he said, his voice softer now, "whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." She turned sharply, her eyes searching his. "You don't know that." Roran stepped closer, lifting a hand to brush a strand of silver hair from her face. "I made a promise, remember?" His voice was steady. "Sure. Humans keep their word." Ayla's breath hitched. "You don't understand. If you change completely, if you become something beyond what you are now, then—" She faltered. "Then what?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then you may forget me." Roran's heart clenched. He reached out, gently taking her hand. "That won't happen." "You can't promise that," she whispered. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Watch me." Ayla exhaled shakily, her fingers tightening around his. The space between them felt electric, charged with something unspoken. Then, slowly, hesitantly, she leaned in. And when her lips met his, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was a quiet, unspoken vow, a tether to something real, something beyond destiny, beyond power, beyond the stars themselves. When they finally pulled apart, Roran rested his forehead against hers. "I don't care what happens to me," he murmured. "I don't care if I change, if I become something else, as long as I still remember this." He lifted her hand between them. "Remember you? Then it's worth it." Ayla closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. "Then I will fight to make sure you never forget." And for the first time, Roran realized this wasn't just about fate. This was choice. His, hers, together, beyond. The viewport, the stars stretched endlessly. Somewhere, out there, Varos was waiting. The Zelthar would come again. The war was far from over. But in this moment, under the silent glow of the cosmos, Roran knew one thing for certain. He had made a promise, and no matter what he became, no matter what the future held, he would never break it.